targeted and killed. So while some people will say, oh, they got a life sentence, why do you need to have another trial? My view, and I talk to victim groups, and I'm interested in your views, but I've talked to many of the civil parties in the cases that we've had so far, is that it's very important to establish in a court of law, an international court of law, what happened in Cambodia and the responsibility of these leaders for what happened. To get into the details of how this horrible, horrible crimes, how they occurred. In the case, so we plan to start that trial in October. We expect it'll start around October. It should be shorter than the first trial because we have asked, I made a motion that the judges take all the evidence from the first trial. They've already heard that, and the defendants, they got a chance to challenge it, and that's already on the record. So a lot of evidence we don't have to repeat. Usually in these kinds of cases, I've done several around the world, what's difficult to prove is not that the crimes happened. We can talk to ordinary victims about that. They can testify. The more difficult part to prove is, well, when these people were killed, these young girls were killed in a village in the Takeo, how was Q Sampan and Munchia responsible? And the evidence, that's more complicated evidence. And that we had to show who they were, what positions they held, what their responsibilities and powers were, how orders were made, how decisions were made in the Khmer Rouge, how they were communicated to the military units and to the district political, down to the village, and how were reports sent back to the center. All of that evidence is already on the record. That's part of the 6,000 documents and the majority of the witnesses who testified in the first trial. So in the second trial, all of the remaining charges will be handled. But in order also to make this efficient and that, so to increase our chances of finishing within the lifetimes of the accused, the court is only going to handle some of the crime sites, not everywhere in Cambodia where this happened, which would be impossible, but only some of the crime sites that represent what happened around the country. So we're not trying all of the security centers, but only several of them, including S21, will be the subject. We have just a couple of the work sites that will be the subject of the trial. And also the trial will include the charges of forced marriage and the rapes that occurred within the forced marriage. The evidence shows and witnesses testified that many of the times when people were forced to marry, they then were monitored to make sure that the marriage was consummated. Young boys, schlap, what do you call it? Schlap? The informants, they would monitor and make sure that these people had sexual relations. So the victims of these rapes, because it was sex without consent, were both the man and the woman in that marriage, in that forced marriage, artificial marriage. So that's where we are on case number 2. There are 2 other investigations that are ongoing. And I can tell you limited things about them because under the law that we have at the court, they're confidential. So I can't tell you the names of the individuals that are the suspects. But the locations that are the subject of the investigation are public. And I don't know if it makes sense now to take time. They're quite long. There's, in case 3, there's about 20 sites. And in case 4, depending on how you count them, there's about 55 different crime sites where people were victimized and that are the subject of the investigations. Now, these are investigations were controversial. This is public, and I can say it. These were 2 cases. The international, my predecessors, the international co-prosecutors had asked to have these cases initiated, and the Cambodian prosecutor took the view that they didn't fit within the jurisdiction of the court. The statute of the court says that this court will only handle crimes between 1975 and 79, the Khmer Rouge period, and it lists the kinds of crimes: genocide, crimes against humanity, and these violations of the Geneva Convention. But it also says it's limited in the type of person that can be tried. So it's not the ordinary soldier, it's only the most senior, the senior leaders and those most responsible. So the Cambodian prosecutor took the view, this is some years ago, that these suspects in case 3 and 4 were not senior and most responsible and didn't fit the jurisdiction of the court. So that is the position. However, there's 2 investigating judges, and the investigations are being carried out, they continue to be carried out by the international co-prosecutor. His name now is, he's been there about 2 years, Mark Harmon, and he specifically asked me to tell you about his investigations and let you know that anyone who believes they may have been a victim in case 3 or 4, you can still apply to be a civil party. Or if you have information that could be useful in those investigations, you could still apply to be, you could contact his office or apply through various ways, lawyers, to be a civil party. And all of that information, I don't know if I can, well, it's all on the website of the court, ecc.gov.kh, ecc.gov.kh. So that you can find. Now, some other aspects of the court I'd just like to talk about before I open it up for your questions. Some of the things that I think this court has done for Cambodia. In case 1 and case 2, this courtroom that we have is much larger than any of the other international criminal tribunals. And of course it's based in Cambodia. It's about an hour out of Phnom Penh, but it's based in Cambodia. The court has done, I think, a very good job of bringing groups to come and see the proceedings. Between case 1 and case 2, 150,000 persons have come and viewed proceedings, trial proceedings, at the ECCC. The court also is the first international court where victims participate as full parties to the proceedings. So you have the prosecution as a party, you have Nun Chia as a party in case 2, Q Sampan as a party, and the victims are parties. And they're represented by lawyers that act as one lead co-lawyer. And they can ask for evidence, they can make arguments, they're full parties. This is the only international court that has that. In case 2, case 1 there were a fewer number, but in case 2 there were 3,867, I believe, civil parties, almost 4,000, 3,867 civil parties participated in that trial. Now, of course, not all of them can testify. As I said, the total number of witnesses, including experts and ex-Khmer Rouge cadre who were called to testify, were 92. But about a third of the witnesses were civil parties. In cases 3 and 4, there's already about 2,000 additional civil parties that have applied to participate. So a total of about 6,000 individuals. And some of them are people in the United States, that have been recruited, that have had the opportunity to participate as civil parties, some from France. And what does that mean for them? I find it's amazing because when I arrived just at the end of the trial, with the closing arguments, I've given closing arguments in other war crimes cases, but I gave it surrounded by my international colleagues, by American or British or French, when I was talking about Liberia or Sierra Leone or Bosnia. But when I stood at the ECCC and took part in the closing arguments, behind me I had a whole row of individuals who themselves were the ones that suffered from this regime. And what I find, and if I can share a little personal information about myself, my family, my father was born in Armenia in 1920, which was sort of towards the end of a genocide, mass killing of Armenians that took place in the Ottoman Empire. And his family fled. next year, April 24th is considered the year that the genocide started, will be the 100th anniversary, 100 years. But if you pick up an Armenian newspaper today, or talk to Armenian people, this is still one, if not the, but it's one of the top topics every day, every week, every month. You still find people talking about what occurred, what happened, why, and what remedies could be provided even today for what happened. So while there are many, many important things going on in Cambodia, like in every country, and the country is moving on, and it's a fast-paced country. You see changes. You see all these kids in the internet cafes with their iPads. You see political changes, the election. There are many very important things going on with the elections, with labor strife. In 50 years from now, no one will know what happened in 2013 and 14, 2013 elections. Almost no one will know about it or talk about it. But they will know and talk about the Khmer Rouge, because it's one of the worst atrocities that ever occurred. It's important not only for Cambodia, it's important for the world. Because if the world doesn't respond and try to give some justice for a situation like Cambodia, what does it say about the world, the kind of world we live in? I find that victims, in all the cases I handle, of course it differs from individual to individual. No victim is forced to talk about it or to testify if they don't want to. But those who do testify, those who choose to do, many times I find that they feel great relief, psychological relief. I remember one man in the Charles Taylor trial who testified. He had had both his hands cut off. He was a Muslim imam. And at the end of his testimony, the judges thanked him, and he just started crying. We met with him, as we did with all witnesses, for a little bit after his testimony to thank him and just ask him how it went, how he felt. And he said, you know why I was crying? I was crying because I was so happy that here I was, taken from Africa to an international court, and these international judges were listening to my story, that I was able to tell my story, what happened to me, to this court. And I found other witnesses who felt the same way. I think it's going to be important not just to those themselves who suffered, but for their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, to understand what happened, to have it documented, and to have an international court recognize this is a crime. This is a crime. People were responsible. It didn't happen on its own. I think that's critical. Also, I believe that the court contributes to the development of the rule of law in Cambodia. We are working together, Cambodian judges and international judges, in the prosecutor's office. We have excellent relations, personal relations, the international prosecutors and the Cambodian prosecutors. The current group that we're working with are young prosecutors, very intelligent. They know that their education is missing a few things, but they're anxious to learn. They don't just want us to write a script for them to read. They want to understand what's going and participate fully. So you see this kind of development of the rule of law slowly. Right? This is a long, slow process that I think the ECCC is contributing to. But most importantly, when it comes to the rule of law, I think what's critical is that the people, the average people around the country, if they learn about the court, it raises their expectations.
តើលោកអ្នកត្រូវការមេធាវីឬតើក្រដាសស្នាមបន្តប្រវេទរបស់លោកអ្នកត្រូវបានគេច្រានចោលឬអ្នកកំពុងមានបញ្ហាក្នុងការធានាគ្រួសារប្តីប្រពន្ធឬគូដណ្ដឹងការិយាល័យមេធាវីវេត្រាតានអាចជួយលោកអ្នកបានយើងខ្ញុំមានបទពិសោធន៍បម្រើសហគមន៍ខ្មែរជាង16ឆ្នាំមកហើយដោយភាពស្មោះត្រង់និងម៉ត់ចត់យើងខ្ញុំមានជំនាញក្នុងការដោះស្រាយករណីពិបាកជាមួយស្ថានទូតអាមេរិកនៅកម្ពុជាយើងទទួលបានភាពជោគជ័យជាច្រើនហើយបើលោកអ្នកមានបញ្ហាខ្សែធនលះលែងគ្នាឬគ្រោះថ្នាក់ដួលរបួសដែលត្រូវការមេធាវីដោះស្រាយទំនាក់ទំនងយើងឥឡូវនេះដើម្បីទទួលបានការប្រឹក្សាដោយឥតគិតថ្លៃទូរស័ព្ទឥឡូវនេះ562 218 2400
because as you know, or I'm sure many of you know, still there are problems with the rule of law in Cambodia. So if you don't have justice for these most serious crimes that occurred, I think people would lose hope. But if they see that in these serious cases, these proceedings are conducted very deliberately, very seriously, and decisions are made not based on who has the most money or the most influence, but based on law. That raises people's expectations, the average person's expectations, that courts should provide justice. And that puts pressure, and that kind of pressure, I think, leads to very slow evolutional change in a society. So I think that the ECC is worth it. It's expensive, like almost all programs to develop a country's society, rule of law. It's slow. If you say it's too little, I would agree. Yes, thousands of people should have been prosecuted, but that's not possible. If you say it's late, I agree. This should have happened 30 years ago, not now. But that's not possible. Now we have a decision to make. The clock is ticking. Yu Sun Pan is 83. Mun Chi is 88. The clock is ticking, and so the question is, do we do nothing? Do we walk away, or do we push on and try to finish and have justice for these remaining crimes that occurred? So just before I take questions, I think you might be interested, I hope. I'm going to try to play a very short video, 9 minutes long, of some mainly civil parties testifying at the ECCC. The first witness you'll see is not a civil party, but I think many of you saw the movie The Killing Fields. The Killing Fields movie. The first witness is the journalist. That's the real person from the movie, Sidney Chung. He's the first witness that testifies. And they're all talking about these forced transfers, what happened to them either in the evacuation of Phnom Penh or the later transfers to the northwest.
Being pushed on beds and all kinds of things with bottles of serum hanging from the bed, and they were all being forced out of the city. And the avenue that we came out on was scattered with the shoes and sandals that people had lost as they were forced to walk quickly in these huge crowds. So I saw it in many parts of the city.
I had no breast milk to feed my young baby, and I did not have medicine, and I did not also have milk. I could only afford water to feed my baby. Unfortunately, my baby died during the evacuation, and I did not even know what to do with my dead baby. I was instructed to bury my baby in the forest. It was like an animal response. I saw one man, but I did not know him or his name. He was walking in an opposite direction, and he was talking that he lost his children. And when he approached the Khmer soldier who was standing, he asked for the permission to return to find his children, but the Khmer soldier shouted back at him to move ahead, otherwise he would be dead. And they used that word, dead, and by that time I was not sure what he meant. And then that man was on his knees begging the Khmer Rouge soldier. And the Khmer Rouge soldiers hit his back with his rifle. Then the man fell on his face on the ground.
This woman was testifying by video link from France.
I told the court earlier that when we were leaving Phnom Penh and we were traveling along National Road number 1, crossing Munibong Bridge, I saw a crying baby. He was actually crawling over the dead body of his mom. I wanted to carry that baby. I wanted to take the baby. From the time when I wanted to carry the baby, and the soldier carried this baby was so brief that I could not actually do anything. But of all of a sudden, when the soldier carried this baby, they just tore the baby apart. It was a very horrifying scene. I could not imagine any human being who would do that. This was horrifying indeed. Actually, the baby was crying. He was crying because he was very hungry. He did not have any milk to drink. He was crawling on the dead body. I did not want to take this baby because I was also afraid of my own safety. So I did not say anything. I just went on walking.
Nobody could run away because they guarded the door of the wagon and they used wooden pole to block the door as well. Some people died in the wagon because they were too exhausted and the wagon was too packed. Although they died, the train did not stop for them to be removed and placed outside. When someone died on the wagon, then the soldiers would push the dead body off the wagon because to them it was just a waste.
And then suddenly I heard a voice saying, give me your watch. A very aggressive voice. And since I was afraid of losing my children whom I had tied together, then I heard a gunshot, and then I saw a man who had just been killed. And that is when I understood that things were very, very serious. We were all very, very afraid.
You also told us that one morning at dawn you were present at the murder of your teacher friend who was buried alive before your eyes. Can you tell the court about the consequences of that scene right up to the very day on you yourself?
Upon witnessing the burial of that friend, I knew that she did not commit any mistake, any serious wrongdoing at all. She only said that she did not know the fate of her two siblings. So I witnessed this lady being buried alive. And I had never seen at all in the history of people burying other people alive. Upon seeing this horrifying scene, I became exhausted and I could not do anything. I witnessed that, but I could not express it in words. That made the situation even worse because I had this painful scene that I had come across, and then I could not even speak it out. This was very serious. I dare not tell anyone about the scene I witnessed. If I risk my life telling other people about this, then of course my life would be in great danger. So I say anything at that time. Under these regimes, I was not allowed to cry, I was not allowed to smile.
Regime. I tried to so close to raise poetry to resolve our livelihood through such a hardship. I tried my best in order to be on my feet today and to be here today in order to find justice for my parents, my relatives, my grandparents, uncles and aunts. Today I am so excited that I am given the opportunity by this international court who crossed the oceans in order to come here to find justice for them and for the Cambodian people who died unjustly under that regime. Today, this is the day that I have been waiting for more than 30 years with anxiety. Today I would like to summon the spirits of my parents, my uncles, grand-uncles, aunts, and all the relatives, totaling 22, who died under the regime, to be here with me in order to hear the prosecution by this court of the murderers and to find justice for you all. And not to be sure that they will be judged when they die. I respect to the court. I would like to make request to you all your honors, which is the international court, to judge fairly and justly in proportion to the gravity of the crimes that they have committed inhumanely against the nation and the people with their torture and all other cruel acts.
Okay, thank you very much.
We've been taught earlier because about the confusion between the term of genocide and tragedy against humanity. Would you please briefly go back to the